Despite the incredible weekend, the incredible race that we saw this past weekend from New Hampshire Motor Speedway that delivered arguably the greatest upset that we have seen this year so far, us as fans and drivers alike, we're still dealt with yet another frustrating decision that NASCAR made regarding a weather-related caution here in the beginning of the race. Let's talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike Bachman. Welcome back to the channel. It's great to see you guys. Thank you so much for clicking on the video. This week, we're going to be talking about NASCAR's decision to let this race go green from this past weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway after some drivers wrecked because of a wet track surface on lap 8. We're going to talk about NASCAR's decision to not throw the caution and not to delay the start of this race and kind of where we go from here, because we have seen this time and time again this season and even last season. So we're going to talk about all of that here today. But before we do get into the actual content of this video, if you are new to the channel, thanks so much for tuning in. Really would encourage you to hit the subscribe button for more commentary and content in motorsports. If this is your cup of tea, then this is the right place for you. We hope that you'll subscribe and stick around for the long term. You've had a lot of support on this channel over the past month or so, and it's all thanks to new guys and girls like you. So thank you so much for your support. So be sure to subscribe. It's free. It helps me out a ton. You could always unsubscribe later if this is not what you're looking for, but I really hope that you'll stick around and, really do appreciate the support. So go ahead, subscribe, and be sure to hit that like button if you do enjoy this type of commentary. Hopefully today is going to be a good one, because I do have a bone to pick with NASCAR and their handling of this situation from this past weekend, as I'm sure a lot of you have understandable and similar frustration as to what transpired from that this past weekend. We're not going to be talking about the actual race. It was an absolute incredible race, arguably the best race of the year in terms of on-track product and just organic racing. Congrats to Eric Almirola on the upset of the year, burst in the playoff bubble. But today we are going to be talking about NASCAR's decision to let the race go green despite a wet track surface in the beginning. So in case you missed the race this past weekend, let me just run you through what exactly happened and why we're talking about this. This race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, the Foxwoods Casino 301, basically began with threatening skies. Nothing in the immediate nothing immediate that really obviously prompted NASCAR to want to delay the start of the race, but it was apparent that, there was precipitation, there was moisture surrounding the track, and there was still precipitation and moisture on the track. If you had tuned into the pre-race, obviously there were talks of weepers still on the apron that the track crew was still trying to, work on and trying to eliminate. There were obviously, some showers, some mist in the area that NASCAR did not deem was going to be an imminent threat that would, delay the start of this race. So with all that in consideration, NASCAR, this thing went green from the start, and I think a lot of people were uneasy about the decision just because they weren't sure if the track was dry enough and if we were going to have a large enough window to actually, get a large majority in this race in before we were ultimately forced under red flag conditions to dry the track. Drivers had reported on the scanners, on their radios, to their spotters, to their crew chiefs, that this was a wet surface as we were going through the caution laps and as we had gotten this thing going. And we only got 8 laps into this thing before leaders Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and others basically sent it into the turn and were along for the ride. Kyle Busch pancaked the outside wall. Martin Truex obviously spun out. His JGR teammate Denny Hamlin spun out. There were a lot of factors there, but as the leaders, they don't have any reaction time. They're just along for the ride, and unfortunately, they had no time to react. They had absolutely no control over the car because of the wet surface, which ultimately ended Kyle Busch's day. Martin Truex was able to salvage enough of the car to come back and finish the race. Denny Hamlin just spun out and didn't get any contact for the most part. But Kyle Busch, the pole sitter, arguably was going to be one of the best cars of the day, ran 8 laps and had a tore-up race car because NASCAR waited to throw the yellow for rain. It was another judgment call that had drivers on the poor end of it. That's just how it is here, ladies and gentlemen. Over the past few weeks, communication between driver and NASCAR higher-ups have not been good. We've heard the next-gen rumors, the safety rumors. We've obviously dealt with the new reconfiguration and repave of Atlanta Motor Speedway. Drivers not happy about that. They just want to feel like they're an asset. They want to have a voice here because, they're the ones in the cars. They're the ones driving these machines. They are the reason why fans tune in to watch every week. It's because of the drivers. Here are what some drivers had to say during the red flag about NASCAR's handling of the situation and where we kind of go from here.
I mean, we've been talking about it for 2 laps and it was raining. There's no sense in saying what I want to say. It doesn't do you any good.
It's wet. I mean, we're on slick tires, and these cars don't have any grip on slick tires and wet asphalt. To me, it's like that's what the job of the corner spotter has in NASCAR. That they're sitting over there. They can feel when it's raining. They can see when it's raining. That's their job, is to tell NASCAR that it's raining. We got to stop. We don't want to have that situation. So you always, in these situations, you want to err on the side of not looking bad, and this is just a bad look.
A lot of interesting things there from drivers like Kyle Busch, MTJ, and others, but Kyle Busch especially. I think a lot of us, we're expecting Kyle Busch to blast the sport. We had our popcorn ready, obviously ready for that post-race interview, but Kyle was reserved, and honestly, rightfully so. It was probably smart that he was because, he probably wasn't going to be in good standing after rattling the cage of the pace car after he wrecked and that whole situation, but he's ultimately not penalized for that. So he probably didn't want to put himself in a worse position, considering anything he would have said just would have done him wrong, in talking about the sport like that. But again, we can understand the frustration of these drivers and, just talking about how it was a bad look for the sport and how it is a learning experience. But that right there is something we need to stop talking about. This is no longer a learning experience. This is the 3rd or 4th time this has happened in 2021 this year. It's not a learning experience because nobody's learned a damn thing. These things still happen. There has to be another way to where we can, avoid these situations. And it all starts, in my opinion, with the drivers. I understand that there are a lot of external factors here that NASCAR deals with, not just with fans at the track, but with the TV window, maximizing viewership. There's a reason why these races are at 3 o'clock every Sunday, and that's not going to change. It's because that's the window that NASCAR feels it could, maximize its viewership and that it can retain its audience. To have a race start rain delayed, you're not going to maybe hold on to all that immediate viewership early because they're going to be watching something else and waiting for the race to start again, and they might not be compelled to come back. I understand all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just another way of putting drivers in a dangerous situation. When guys are running slick tires like this, it's like you're driving on ice. Martin Truex Jr. said it in his interview. It's like you're driving on ice. There's absolutely no tread. There's no control. You send it into the corner, and you're along for the ride. And ultimately, it could be a dangerous one depending on how fast you're going and depending on, where you crash into that wall and with whom you do that with. So it's a lot of torn up cars, a lot of tore up sheet metal that didn't deserve to be tore up. If you're Kyle Busch, arguably the best car of the day, you have the millions of dollars that it makes to manufacture these cars and build them every week, and the time and the effort and the hours that it takes, all that is just ripped away. You have the sponsorship dollars that these these companies put into these teams and into this sport, and they don't get the TV time because their car's in the garage and not on the track for the rest of the day. So it's obviously understandable frustration from a car owner's perspective, from a driver's perspective, and from those at the shop that build these things every single week. So, there are multiple factors here, and there's a lot of pressure on NASCAR to deliver in these judgment situations. But if there's one thing, we talk about consistency, if there's one thing that NASCAR has been consistent about, it's been that it's been consistently frustrating. As a fan, as a driver, and this system just needs to be overhauled because it's not working. These things are still happening. Now, I got to respect Steve O'Donnell for coming on the NBC broadcast during this red flag to try and explain the situation, explain their thought process through this. So here is what Steve O'Donnell had to say in the booth during the red flag with Junior, Jeff Burton, and Steve Letarte.
Certainly an unfortunate situation of what we just saw, but we can only go by kind of the pre-race discussions we have before the race. Kip Childers, who drives our pace car, constant communication with him before the race starts. Are we good to go? Even the lap before we start and we go green, Kip gave us the all clear to start that race. And then as the race started progressing, right before Kyle got loose in turn 2, obviously on wet track conditions. The communication to us was from the flag stand that we're seeing some mist. In any normal circumstance where we hear that, our next call is to the pace car, which is in turn 1 here. Are you seeing anything on your windshield? Drops started picking up. Kip communicated that. As Tim Berman's about to put out the yellow, we look down and the 18 car is already getting loose. So I've been here a number of years. That's the first time I've seen that in terms of how quickly it came upon us. Certainly missed. We've raced in missed conditions before, but the track got slick, obviously, in a hurry, and it was unfortunate what took place.
Typically when something like this happens, what does NASCAR do the following week? What kind of conversations will you guys have internally about the process and maybe how to streamline it or speed it up? And how will the drivers play a role in that?
Oh, they always play a role in it, so we'll be talking to the drivers during the week. And I think, that was our normal process. Obviously, in this time, we had some challenges of what just happened, but the communication from our standpoint was really quick from the flag stand to the pace car. We'll just employ some more things up in the spotter stand and make sure that communication continues in as real time as possible.
Steve O'Donnell was quick to just point out, how quick the rain came upon us. We've never seen anything like this and all that other BS, And he talks about how we've raced in missed conditions before. Well, Steve O'Donnell, we've raced in missed conditions before. Take a look at how all of those have unfolded, my friend. We go back to Texas 2020, the playoff Texas race. That race was begun under missed conditions. I remember Steve Letarte before the cars went green. I remember him saying how any precipitation threatens the track. Any precipitation can be an issue. And it doesn't matter how little there is. It doesn't matter how much there is. Precipitation is precipitation. A wet surface is a wet surface. It's going to be harder to drive. It's going to be harder for these drivers to control these cars. Under a wet surface, doesn't matter how serious or significant it is. So we saw Kevin Harvick, the leader at the time, on lap 30, lose control, pancake the outside wall, which ultimately took him out of his championship run. I think a lot of people point to that race and that moment as the moment that Kevin Harvick lost his championship. And as a result, wasn't in the championship for. He was the most dominant driver of the year and didn't get a chance to run for that championship. I look back at the fall with the Xfinity Series, run at the Charlotte Roval. Talk about a race run in the rain, dealing with standing water, dealing with the fishtailing and the spray that the water takes with these drivers going at these high speeds. Visibility, it's basically non-existent as for a spotter and as for a driver. Fans will point to that race as being that one of the more exciting races of the year, obviously, just with everything that was happening. But with cars slipping and sliding, and it's like you can't even control a car anymore dealing with all that standing water. It makes absolutely no sense to continue to run like that, And then we take a look at this year. We go back to the Daytona road course. A little bit of a different scenario, might I add, because we take a look at that race where rain really was not a factor, yet NASCAR felt compelled to throw a caution late to have drivers have the option to put rain tires on the car, where in the rule book it states that if NASCAR were to throw a caution, if NASCAR believed that they could no longer drive with dry conditioned equipment, cars would be brought down to pit road, they would exchange their slicks for wets, and they would illuminate the caution lights on the cars and the windshield wipers. None of that happened. No team came down and changed their slicks for wets because the track was dry enough to still run with slick tires and not wets, because the disadvantage running from slicks to wets there on a dry surface is massive. And they did not illuminate the caution lights, which in the rule book states that they must. And the windshield wipers did not have to go. So with all that in consideration, take a look at that. That's a version of NASCAR just trying to manipulate the end of a race to spike ratings using that leverage, if you would call it. I don't even know what the hell you would call it. It's just manipulation at that point to try and create a more exciting finish out of that one. And you know what? They did. So whatever. And then we take a look at Circuit of the Americas, a similar situation back at the road course last year. With all that rain, with the fishtailing and the spray, it was very, very difficult for drivers and spotters to be able to see. We take a look at the one wreck from Martin Truex Jr. and Cole Custer. Truex got into a little bit of a scrap, and then Cole Custer down the backstretch, just bam, plows into Martin Truex Jr. at what was probably 170, 180 miles an hour plus. Like a he had no option. He had no control over the car. Spotters can't see anything with all that mist and water getting sprayed up by these cars. I mean, it's like you're driving on a highway. You drive on a highway in wet conditions when it's raining. There's a lot of spray in front of you. And obviously, traffic's going to be a lot more slower because of that. Well, when these guys are going 180 plus and they can't see, it's extremely dangerous, and drivers should not be racing in those type conditions. So we take a look at all those different scenarios, some similar, some different, all unique in their own way, and we're still having this problem. And it's like, yeah, we're going to take this data, this information, and fix it. Well, it's like, how are we going to fix it? We need a new system. When you got drivers on the radio reporting a wet surface, and you give the pace car the 1-to-go signal, you're not looking out for your drivers. You're not. You're not even listening to them or even taking them into any consideration. They're the ones putting their lives on the line every week. Don't matter how safe these cars get. They're still putting their lives on the line every week, and you're just ignoring the fact. And all you're doing is waiting for someone to get hurt or waiting for a car to get wrecked to then justify, okay, now we need to throw the caution because we got torn up cars. And that's just not the way that it should be done. This is a situation where NASCAR needs to be conservative and try and sacrifice just a little bit of its potential viewership loss to keep the drivers safe and from not putting them at risk from doing unnecessary damage to their cars or to themselves. So where and when do we draw that line? Like I said, NASCAR does have a lot of pressure to deliver in viewership and to maximize their television audience, So from that perspective, I sort of get it. But it's still kind of stupid that we're in these situations on a daily basis from track to track, and we're still doing the same damn thing and not making an effort to fix it. And again, it's just a gut punch for a lot of these teams, that put in all the work, that run 10 laps just to get wrecked. I mean, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's like, what are they going to do? What can they do? At that point, they're just there. With all that in consideration, it really brings us to the situation of, what's the solution? How do we fix this? So the first thing is, maybe you do introduce rain tires at flat tracks like New Hampshire Motor Speedway. NASCAR has conducted multiple tests this year. They did one at Martinsville. They did one at Richmond. Joey Logano tested at Richmond a few months ago. They have collected data and they have analyzed these situations if it's feasible. And, if it's going to work for rain tires at these types of tracks. The one external factor that I still don't see them doing or working around is the spray from the track. Any wet surface, you're going to get spray from the tires, and we see it at these road courses. You might not get it at a track like New Hampshire or Richmond because of the speeds that these guys are going, but at some of these road courses, they're exceeding 180 miles per hour heading into some of these corners with these long straightaways. And we have seen, some dangerous wrecks, some scary situations this past year from, situations like that. So that is the one thing that I just see with rain tires maybe not working. But that is a situation. If they can make it possible, why not? Obviously you don't want standing water. That's never going to have a place in NASCAR. But if it's a situation like this at New Hampshire where you have a pop-up shower, it might serve the sport better to run with rain tires because then at least they could start and end the race on time and try and work through it while still keeping the drivers safe. The other thing they could do is just establish better communication between all the parties involved. What Steve O'Donnell was talking about, the process that they do, it's from the tower to Kip Childress behind the pace car to the corner spotters and to the other people. I mean, it's just back and forth, and by the time all that information is relayed from one guy to the next, you got half the field wrecking because of a wet surface. So whatever you want to do here, make it just easier. Make it just like, all right, there's precipitation in the area, caution the race. I mean, you would rather be conservative in this situation, in my opinion, than to put drivers at risk, I just don't know what else to say about it. The current system is broken. I don't know what they need to do, but they need to rework this system and just make it a lot less complicated to actually determine when the surface is too wet. If they say they're listening to the scanners and listening to the drivers saying that the track is literally wet, then listen to them. I mean, why do you got to get affirmation from other confirmation from other parties involved when you're getting it right from the driver's seat? And if drivers aren't comfortable with that, then you need to caution the race because, the drivers are the reason why we tune in every week. They are the reason why we watch this sport, and they should be the most valuable party involved in these types of situations because they're in the driver's seat. That's kind of my feeling on it. Again, it sucks that it happened on arguably the best race of the year here from New Hampshire. But again, it's a problem that we need to talk about and we need to fix because it's not a learning experience. It's a situation that keeps happening, and it's only going to continue to happen if we keep putting it on the back burner and worrying about other little details in the sport that don't matter as much as something like this. Because if we could figure out rain and weather, Mother Nature is NASCAR's worst enemy. It has been ever since it instituted. So we need to figure out how to avoid these situations and put the drivers in an environment that is safe if you want to try and run in the rain. That's all. I think that starts with fixing the communication system and making the drivers a bigger part of this by listening to them more than they do now. So let me know what you guys think about what has transpired over this past week and how NASCAR is handling their weather-related cautions. I'd be very interested to see, what your solution would be to something like this because it's just frustrating as a fan. And just to see the drivers like this, it sucks. It really does. So I'd be very curious to hear what you guys have to say. Be sure to leave it down in the comments section. If you have made it to this point, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Be sure to leave a like on the video. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more NASCAR and motorsports content. We're going to have stuff dropping here over the next few weeks, especially as we're into this 2-week break. So definitely want to catch up with content here. But I do appreciate all the support. So that's going to do it for this video today. Thank you again for tuning in. Hope I was able to kind of shed some light on this ordeal, but it's definitely a problem, and it's definitely something we gotta try and figure out a solution to. So hope you guys enjoy. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.